All right. So, this was a very interesting article, and I wanted to go over it with you guys. The lovely Helldivers 2 is once more in the lexicon of discussion. Paul Tassi, who works with Forbes, he's one of the good ones. He makes a lot of good articles. I actually really like the fact that he's one of the relatively few, and far fewer than before, good game journalists out there. He actually creates good content. He makes good discussions. He talks about real reasons behind certain aspects of certain stories in gaming. Paul Tassi wrote about this article in Forbes. After initial success, Helldivers 2 has lost 90% of its players with no signs of recovery. Let me see if... Okay, so he has a chart. Okay. I was going to see if I had to look up my own. The article was published on 6/29 and republished on 6/30. So let's read the article. I have some thoughts on this, and I've been pretty harsh about Helldivers 2. And I've only been harsh about it because I hate what Sony did with the game, and I loved what Arrowhead did making the game. So I actually think Helldivers 2 is still my game of the year for 2024 as a game. However, I will say that it has some seriously clear issues and seriously clear things that haven't been touched upon or even remotely fixed in the past several months, mostly because of Sony as well. And this is why we're seeing these numbers that we're seeing now. Now, do I think the game is dying? Actually, you know what? We'll read the article first, and I'll talk about the discussions as we move forward. I'll answer it, though. Yes, I think the game's dying. Absolutely. Is it dead? No, it's not dead. You can't be at 44,000 concurrent players and consider a game dead. Is it having some serious issues, though? Absolutely. And I think if you care about Helldivers 2 and you actually care about the game, whether you play it now or not, or whether you played in the past, you stopped it, whether you cared about Sony's issues or not, if you want to see Helldivers 2 succeed in any way, shape, or form, you have to be clear and very honest about the issues the game has. Because if you aren't, you're not giving good feedback to the developers. And if you aren't, then you just frankly don't care enough about the game. And the game will die if enough people think this way. That is what will happen. I certainly hope that doesn't happen. I would love to see the game succeed even more. All right. There's always some annoyance when player count declines are brought up in a gaming space, but in this case, this is a fairly significant story. We're not talking about Starfield losing 90% of its players since launch as a single-player game. Rather, this is Helldivers 2, which is meant to be Sony's big proof of concept that it can make it in a big impact in the live space. Yes, this is true. Sony has tried to make a live service game many, many times before. Helldivers 2 is the only remote success it has possibly had in any way, shape, or form. This is absolutely true. Also, what he's talking about here in the little caveat here, talking about how this is not like Starfield. Basically, a lot of people bring up game numbers and player count, concurrent player count with single-player games, which is borderline idiotic. Because single-player games are made to be played once. You finish the game, you stop playing the game, and you're done with the game. You paid for it, and it's good to go. That's it. That's how a lot of these games are made to be played, and that is fine. There's nothing wrong with the fact that almost 1 million people were concurrently playing Baldur's Gate 3 for when it first launched, and even up to like 3 months after it launched. And now the numbers are far fewer. And people are still enjoying the game, but it's a complete storyline. You play it once, you play through the entire thing. Sometimes you can create, new characters, whatever. But, if you've experienced it once, generally, a giant chunk of the player base will not replay a game, no matter how much replayability occurs in the game. That is totally fine. That is how these games are supposed to work. Live service games, however, are completely different. Games like League of Legends, games like Counter-Strike, games like Helldivers 2. These are live service games. They're made to be a long-form style game with ebbs and flows where player count goes up and down depending on the level of... the level of updates in a game, whether it's seasonal, whether it's patches, whether it's expansions, or whatever. and it's supposed to have a fairly high level of concurrent player count for a very, very long time because it's permanently getting updates, but it's also, you're permanently paying for it as well. And, MMOs are like this as well. So, but a few months after launch, the game has seen extremely steep declines, and despite new additions and galactic war plot turns, nothing is reversing course. This is absolutely true, and I have a very, very big reasons why. We'll go into that as they come up, I think. The simultaneous release of Helldivers 2 on PlayStation and PC helped make it a huge hit, especially on PC, where it hit 458,000 concurrent players in 2 weeks after launch. But that was indeed the peak, and it has declined 90% in 4 months, down to 44,000 peak concurrent players. As such, is routinely seen outside the top 10 list and is number 58 in top sellers on the service. The most viewed Twitch stream of the game at this moment has 56 views. I'm actually curious what the number is right now. We're going to check. Let us see. Okay, Helldivers 2. Let's sort by high to low. There it is. Okay. So 357, 142, 42, 33. I mean, it's nowhere near its peak months and everything like that at all in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge decline. Huge decline. That's brutal. Understandable, though, and I'll go into why. I think that the biggest reason why, by the way, we'll talk about this more as we go forward, is because of the Sony debacle. I think a lot of people downgrade how much the Sony debacle affected it. The thing is that the PSN network issue has made it so they only partially reverse course. If you bought the game in the 180 countries and regions way back, and I covered this extensively. I was very proud of all the coverage we did on this. Very, very major issue. But basically what it is this. At this point, if you bought the game in those 180 countries and regions, and you lost access to the game and you did not refund your access to the game, you can play the game now. However, if you did refund, or if you never owned the game in the first place, you cannot buy the game moving forward. So essentially, what is it, like 90% of the Earth's area and population cannot buy Helldivers 2. So, when a game's population declines, which happens for every single game ever made, usually that number is made up with people either returning due to big, updates, or new players coming into the game. Everyone forgets about the second group. Helldivers 2 doesn't have anyone new coming to the game. Why would they? Because they're completely locked out of playing the game and buying the game. If you in 180 countries, which is a lot. That's billions of people. Billions with a B, mind you. The other issue is that it also cuts off global gaming communities from each other. This is an inherently cooperative game. If I'm playing the game and my friends in Europe, in various countries in the Baltics and everything like that, cannot play Helldivers 2, I have less reason to play Helldivers 2. This has happened to a lot of people. This has absolutely contributed to the decline in player count. Now, was it a sharp decline? Point A, by the way, this little A point, he's going to talk about the Sony debacle. And that's when it happened. It didn't lead to a sharp decline in and of itself. That is true. And he might bring this up in this article. And that would be true. However, it also hampered the returning growth and the ebbs and flows a normal live service games goes through. And it has only made what would have been an up and down into only a down. There is no up anymore for Helldivers 2, and it's because of Sony. That's my thesis, and we'll go more into the detail as we move forward. But let us continue the article. Is there more? Yeah, there's more. Okay. Oops. This is so important because this is a live game. This is the type of game that Sony wanted to make an impact with and become an ongoing success. not just an initial one. This is very true, and I talked about that. Sony can sell plenty of copies of single-player games, and it's fine if the player count significantly drops after rather quickly once players are finished. But there's no finishing Helldivers, which is constantly adding new gear, cosmetics, major orders, and new fronts of the war. Players most recently have been complaining that higher levels were too punishing, but after a large-scale buff patch, it barely moved the needle. Also, I want to point out that while Arrowhead, which is the developers of Helldivers, can be, very positively hailed in many different ways, and this is great, there's two major things to remember. First of all, it never expected the level of success that it ever reached with Helldivers. Their normal player count that they thought they would ever reach at peak was like 48,000. This is a number that Arrowhead themselves has stated. I'm not making this up. You can feel free to look it up. I will absolutely stand by these remarks because I read them from Arrowhead themselves. They never expected to reach the level of 495,000 concurrent player count. It's crazy. It's super high. They never expect to reach it. So the fact that they reached it is its own success. That, however, brought with it many different issues and many different challenges that they were not prepared for. Instead of doing things like developing new enemies and new weapons and new this and new that, they were focused on making the game playable for a player base that was 10 times larger than they originally thought that they were going to have. That took away dev resources from being able to do other things like actually, moving the game forward with the actual game updates. So that's an understanding to have moving forward. However, it's been 4 months. We still haven't seen hide nor hair of the so-called third type of enemy, which was touted since the launch of the game and has been in Helldivers 1, by the way, as well. That's why people know about who it is and what it is, and people were so hyped about it until, people stopped playing the game. The other issue is that the patches for buffs were far too far and few in between. Now, this is due to the fact that they've been so busy handling different things. Sure, totally fine. However, that just doesn't change the fact that they didn't do what they needed to do in order to keep the game fresh for people. The problem is that every single mission type is the exact same thing. Kill bugs, kill robots. I enjoy that, and that's not why I quit playing the game myself. However, if you do that for 500 missions, doing it for a 501st mission seems far less appealing. And that is understandable. There's nothing wrong with that. And this is why having an open player base where you can sell the game in other countries to have people get back into the game, or new players from 180 countries, makes a big difference. They no longer have that outlet and that avenue to increase their own player base. This is on Sony, by the way. So there's some blame to go around here, but there's definitely blame for Arrowhead as well, I think, here as well. And I think that people who think that Arrowhead has zero blame in the matter, guys, either you care too much about your opinion of a company or you care too little about the game. Because I'm spitting facts as they are. And giving constructive criticism is very important for caring about a game and wanting it to succeed moving forward. Acting like things are nothing but rainbows and butterflies is going to do nothing for the long-term health of the game. And we've seen many other games like this where people are, they're going to have their head in the sand. They're not going to think of any issues for their game. Nothing that their game dev company that they think is their favorite can do no wrong. And as a result, the game dies. Because there were no updates, no constructive criticism happened, no good feedback happened, and the devs didn't know what to do to fix their game. And slowly but surely, the game died. Guess what? You defended your company to the death. The company died. Congratulations. I don't want that to happen. I honestly don't want that to happen. Let me hit some comments here. Helldivers 2 was built to handle function with the exact same population Helldivers 1 had. So about 2,000 to 5,000 players. No, they didn't think it was going to be that. But they did expect to have about 48,000 peak. And it would go down to about like the 20s and the 10s. Fizz Seltzer. At least that's what my reading was from Arrowhead's own conversation. However, I agree with you in spirit, for sure, where they expected the player base to be much smaller, but like a consistent, in the thousands as opposed to the tens of thousands, generally. Completely agree with you there. Completely agree with you there. Same missions, same two enemy factions, basically the same map with different biomes. Exactly, Joey. Exactly. I think people massively oversell the 180 countries thing. About 2/3 of those are countries with very little consumer base. With the businessmen sit around the table, they aren't considering purchasing power of Ethiopia. Yeah, but I think that's completely incorrect, though. Because, like, dude, we're talking about countries also like Bangladesh, which is 100 and, what is it, like 300 million people in Bangladesh. Pakistan has 360 million people. The Baltic nations in Europe have millions and millions of people, and they're westernized countries. It's not just Ethiopia. And also, why is it so easy for people to say that people from Ethiopia don't deserve to play Helldivers 2? I think this is also a problem with optics as well. The thing is, when people are correctly bashing a game over gatekeeping their game to other people, it absolutely negatively affects the game, especially when it's a cooperative game. This is a cooperative live service game. That's why this conversation means more than it would in the framing of a single player game or of a maybe even a competitive shooter or whatever. Honestly, like, I think that's why this game is tailor-made to play with your friends. If you have friends in Ethiopia or whatever, if you have friends in 180 different countries and they can't buy the game, you as an American or as someone in Canada or whatever, one of the countries that isn't banned, you will be less likely to play the game. And the chances that you have friends in one of the 180 countries is actually quite significantly higher than originally in any other year of existence. The internet has only made us far more global as gamers, and Discord and, good internet being accessible for many, many people and so on and so forth. I sincerely think that. I don't think you're trying to gatekeep or anything like that, by the way, Fitz. I'm just saying what other people think. Yeah, exactly. Gatekeepers would rather gatekeep a dead game than admit they were wrong. Yeah, people in general don't like to admit they're wrong. In fact, one of the best ways to succeed as a content creator is to just tell your audience that they're right all the time. Which is why, like, what you see is what you get with me. Authenticity. If I think you're wrong about something, I will respectfully tell you I think you're wrong about something. Now, will that make me more popular with you? Probably not. But is that what I am? And I'm going to be authentic no matter what? Absolutely. Respectfully, but absolutely I'll be authentic to the day I have my last breath. Absolutely. And welcome, Frog. Good to see you, my friend. But yeah, looking at the numbers, there's been no significant surge other than a brief spike when a mass automaton invasion happened. That was right here. But the interest fell sharply after a week, and since then, the game has continued to shed players quickly. Yes, the game is updating itself too slowly. The other issues here are the format, both in terms of content, but also monetization. This is not a game that has announced any major expansions like the other live PvE games might. This is absolutely true, and we touched upon this already. The timeline of what is added and when is a surprise, and even a major event like the introduction of a new enemy race to fight, the Illuminate, will arrive at some point. This is the third race I was talking about. Will not cost anything to participate in. In addition, Helldivers 2 is one of the most player-friendly monetization systems out there, with premium currency easy to earn in-game. Great for us, not ideal for Sony when the entire point of the format is significant recurring revenue, and even less ideal when 90% fewer players are now playing than at launch. Also true. Sony is very not happy about this, by the way. I can tell you that much for sure. I'm not calling Helldivers 2 a failure. No, okay, yeah. I think this is very clear. Yes. All of my criticisms are not to call this game a failure. By the way, these are constructive criticisms for Arrowhead to have moving forward in order to make the game better and have long-term success. I would love to see Arrowhead have long-term success even if I no longer play the game because of the PSN debacle. I know a lot of people, this didn't move the needle with them, and I don't blame them. They want to play Helldivers 2 their heart's content. Excuse me, sorry for the burp. I have no qualms with that. Zero qualms with that. Enjoy it. I want the game to succeed. It's a good game. It deserves success. However, I personally can't support it because of the PlayStation Network debacle. And there's nothing wrong with that. I can still hope for the game to succeed as a result. And the way to succeed is with constructive criticism of things that could be improved in the future. This is not a trajectory you want to see for a live ongoing game. Exactly. Yes. And Helldivers 2 is not a failure. If it was a failure, no one would be talking about it. The thing that will kill a game faster than anything else is apathy. People are upset about this and people are loud about this because we kind of want the game to survive and we want it to succeed. We want it to have an increase in player base. This would be great. Even if they don't change anything else to the PSN network, that's fine. Or not fine, but like it is what it is. Actually, I think honestly a big thing is as well the fact that they were so obtuse about it when the entire situation happened. The fact that like Arrowhead had reached out very openly, and you can look at Pilested's tweets. This has been a thing in Pilested's tweets up until like, what was it, like 3 weeks after the PSN debacle finished. His last statement on it was 3 weeks afterwards, and I've covered it many, many times, about how Pilested's last word on the subject was they were working on getting the game to be viable in those countries again. And Sony stated that they would do so. And they promised us they would do so, and they just, waited until we forgot about it. And Pilested's last word was he was reaching out to them, trying to figure it out. And that was the very last word. That was months ago at this point. The fact that there's been no word either way is kind of really annoying. And it is a very glaring issue that has happened to people looking more negatively on the game. Now, that can be something that you want to hear or not want to hear, but that is the truth. It is absolutely something that does affect the needle in some way. There's no doubt about that in my mind, because I know a lot of members of my own community and myself who have people in those countries who can't play the game, and we decided we don't want to play the game either. This is it's not a huge population, but it is a significant number as well. It's not insignificant. Not to say it doesn't suck that it's blocked. I'm not that delusional. I'm just saying that if 180 countries were unbanned, lifting like magic, the game probably wouldn't zip up to 200k players. No, it wouldn't. However, it would see steady increases in player counts for countries that like games like this and like grind far more than even we do. For example, China. Dude, Chinese people fucking love grinding games. Are you kidding me? I knew a lot of Chinese players that play the game when I was playing randomly. I would randomly queue with them all the time. I think the Chinese player base was gigantic. And a lot of those were in significant regions and areas that were completely banned. And those people join games for like years to come. I think what's really hurting Helldivers 2 is there's nothing to play for. Yes, that is that as well. I completely agree with you with that. If you look at a game like Warframe, the combats and modes haven't changed in literally 7 years, but the game's constantly supplied with things to chase. I agree with that. But I think also in lieu of that, if they don't want to add like, way too many items to have and so on and so forth, having like different game modes and different mission types is also very important. We haven't had a new mission type, at least in the entirety of the time that I played Helldivers 2. It was all the exact same mission types as before. Put in a code while you're being ransacked by a whole bunch of droids. Kill 30 nests. 10 Bile Titans. Number of this, number of that. Do a random arbitrary thing while you wait for a timer to go down, while everything's attacking you. You can only do that so many times. I'll say the fact that they're treating the game like it's a PvP game, they've done more nerfs than buffs. Yes, that sentiment completely negatively impacted the game over the past, 2 months straight. To the point that Pilested himself, who is now lead game designer as opposed to being CEO of Helldivers, he's very directly talked about this. He's talked about the fact that he thinks there are too many nerfs than there are buffs, and that's why they had a huge buff patch and everything like that. The problem is, when things change too little and too late, it doesn't move the needle enough. That's the problem. And that's exactly what happened here. But yeah, going back to the article, the game has not been amongst PlayStation's top 10 either, most played in a long time. And that list remains almost entirely years old of hits. As in Fortnite, Call of Duty, GTA Online, Overwatch 2, Roblox. But Sony wants their own live service game to be big on the platform. It's always bigger on Steam, but it's declined significantly with no signs of recovery on either platforms, I think what he's trying to get to, which makes sense. Helldivers 2 was viewed as proof of concept that Sony could really break out and move into the live space with great success. but the last few months have proven how hard it is that success can be to maintain for even a short amount of time, given the well-established competition in these spaces. Yeah, I think this is absolutely true. Update, since this has gained a lot of traction, both positive and negative, I'd figured I'd respond to some of the feedback directly. Some of the most recent posts sort of sums it up. Let's see. So, Bucky, the CM of Palworld. Please stop getting baited into player number arguments on Discord, Twitter, and Reddit. I see you guys in the comments, but it's really sweet of you to stand up for Palworld, but it's super not worth your time. Oh, yeah, people were comparing Palworld to Helldivers. Palworld is a game that had a limited amount of content. It wasn't a live service game. It never was going to be. It's going to have significant updates, but like very few and far between. Like the biggest update that's coming out with is like a giant update that's coming out in like 2 months or something like that. And that's it. And that was, I think, shown at the Summer Games Fest. It was something. And it showed like new region, things like that. But this is not a live service game. The posts are pure engagement bait. I don't agree with that. Sometimes they're engagement bait. Sometimes they're actually like just hitting a statement incorrectly, but they still bring up relatively good points that are worth discussing, I would say. 99% of them. Yeah, okay, yeah. Majority of them are sucky, yeah. NPCs desperate for a post to do numbers, and the other 1% is just media doing what media does. Palworld at 2 million, then 15K, and now it's 140K. It's not something to get angry about. In a few weeks, it'll go down again. Next major update, it'll go up. That's just how it works. But, like, that's the thing. This is how it's working for Palworld. This is not how it's working for this game, for Helldivers 2. And that's the issue. I think he's like, his heart is in the right place, and he's talking about this in his own correct manner, and I understand what he's trying to say. But the problem is that's not constructive for Helldivers 2 living longer and being a longer played game with a more active player base. That doesn't help the situation at all. I've had some good conversations about Bucky about this sort of thing in the past. In this instance, I think that I'm 1% there, and this was sparked by, at least in part, by my pair of pieces yesterday, and talking about Helldivers numbers continually dropping and Palworld seeing a big surge into the expansion. Again, like I say in the piece, it is a different scenario when Sony's trying to find long-term, here we go, significant success with the live game, and Helldivers 2's current model of minor additions and new gear to spend medals on has not moved the needle. Exactly. The updates are few, far between, and they don't do enough to actually, like you said, we had someone who came in here and said that it doesn't add things to chase for. That is absolutely part of the problem. I think it's only part of the problem, but this is absolutely part of the problem. And there's no roadmap like other live service games. Yeah, you have nothing to look forward to. Dude, even games like pretty much almost every game has a roadmap, right? Like, what live service game does not have a roadmap? Does anyone know? I can't think of a single live service game off the top of my head that does not have a roadmap. Even if they don't listen to the roadmap, even if they don't follow the roadmap, I'm pretty sure every single game has a roadmap. Last Epoch has a roadmap. I even just covered that a few days ago. Warcraft has bunches of roadmaps. Diablo 2 basically has roadmaps down to a science. I think every live service game that I can think of, at least that has a significant number of people, has a roadmap. We'll bring some of the players back. Joey, they already did that. They had a giant buff patch, and it didn't move the needle at all. Literally at all, Joey. That's the thing. That's the reason we're talking about this. But yeah, it did not move the needle. They did do it, but it was too far late. It was too little and too late. Yeah. Exactly. And if they continue doing it, it'll make the people who are playing happier, and so maybe the numbers will decrease less. So it's overall a very good thing. However, I think it's too late for that kind of thing. I think we need more larger updates, more things to chase, more game types, and so on and so forth. You need actual new large-scale things in order to bring players back. The game is not even settled at a concurrent player count, and it's still sliding down. This is also true. I reject the idea it is not important to talk about player count numbers, especially in the context of burgeoning live service games. I agree with Paul Tassi here. I agree it's stupid when you do this for single player games, unless it's the other direction, like how amazing it is that people are still playing Baldur's Gate 3. Completely agree with him here. Take Suicide Squad, for example, which I noted debuted with half as many players as Avengers, and soon after was averaging just a few hundred players on PC a day, dropping off all console lists. This was a major story, and I think tracking Helldivers is a story for Sony. Yes, I agree. And we tracked Suicide Squad in great detail because of the abject level of design failure it was on every single, letter of the alphabet. It sucked from A, B, C, D, E, F, and G all the way to Z. That was Suicide Squad. Helldivers 2 is significant because it's having similar types of player count drop-off while not being that level of suckage. It's not a shit game like Suicide Squad is. It's not in any way, shape, or form a shit game. It's a good game. However, it's still having massive drop-off. And we care about the game, which is why we're talking about it. Just that I don't really see a coherent plan to stop the declines, and much of the feedback was explaining why there are indeed so many players leaving. Mostly that its format has grown stale and that there are too many nerfs. Many may have quit before a recently mass buff patch, but overall the trend looks like a delayed version of a single player release, which is not what you ideally want to see for a live service game. So I do think it's an important conversation about the health of the industry and particularly ongoing investments in so many live service productions, but you are free to disagree. I agree with him here, and also I think it's really important to know that the people with the head in the sands the most are the most vehement defenders of Helldivers 2, and also Sony themselves. I think they're the ones that are really not trying to see a path moving forward. They would rather never admit they're wrong than have the game actually go through growing pains and start actually growing again. By having the hard conversations, by doing the hard work that it takes to really make a live service game succeeds. Look at Destiny 2. Destiny 2 might be one of the most roller coaster games out there, with the numbers going so far down with the worst updates and so far high with the best updates, including the final shape which just came out. The final shape has had peak numbers that they've not had in years, which is crazy. And it is something to remember. I'm not someone who even likes Destiny 2. I don't even play Destiny 2. However, the success that they reached with the final shape is something to understand and figure out, and how that could be used as a template for other live service games moving forward. There's a reason every live service game that Sony has ever tried has pretty much fallen flat on its face. It's because they don't listen to criticism. And I fear that this will be the same way for Helldivers 2. Because remember, guys, publishers have a lot of power when it comes to the updates of a game and to the game's lifespan itself. And Sony is very directly the publisher for Helldivers 2. Arrowhead might try their ass off to try to figure out, updates for the game and so on and so forth, but they're new to this. They have Helldivers 1, but Helldivers 1 was a very small player base. They're new to handling a player base of this size, even of a size of 44,000 or whatever. They need the guidance of, Sony to be able to do this correctly, and they're not going to get it. I really don't think. Helldivers 1 was very niche. Yeah, exactly. And Helldivers 2 is on its road to be very niche as well. And if they don't want it to be, they're going to have to start to listen to what people are saying and actually make the very, very large-scale changes and very, very large-scale updates that is needed to make a live service game like this succeed. Destiny 2 has only had large player base increases because they literally release an actual expansion every other year. And granted, I think they do too many, and I think that makes it very inaccessible for people like me, but it still works for their own player base. And it is, in and of itself, a form of success. And also, by the way, guys, if anyone's in the comments and about to say, well, Destiny 2 is a Sony game, it is now. But for the vast majority of the lifespan of Destiny 2, Bungie was not owned by Sony. So it has no here nor there for the conversation. I know what I'm talking about. Anyways, I just wanted to talk about this. I would like to see Helldivers 2 succeed, and I think they have to have some very, very hard conversations with themselves, and that's why I think Paul Tassie's article is so important here. And I think a lot of content creators right now, like I've seen like a little bit of bits and pieces of people on Twitter talking about this and stuff, and I think they all have their heads in the sand. They're like, oh, well, you know, 44,000 is not a failure of a game. No one worth their salt is really calling it a failure. Paul Tassi himself is not calling it a failure. I'm not calling it a failure. However, I am saying that it is a very, very big issue for the game moving forward. And if you're not willing to call a spade now, the game will die in months. I don't want the game to die in months. That's why I'm being maybe overly harsh, but I think it's proper. If you're not overly harsh, and if you're not like really constructive and very, very strong with your criticisms, when the game dies, you only have yourself to blame. And I don't want to have my friends who play Helldivers 2 be upset about the game dying in 3 months. I really don't want that to happen. And I think it's very likely. So hopefully they figure it out. I would love to see them figure it out. And me, creating this video to help move the conversation forward a little bit on my end, I think is my little way of helping Helldivers 2 move forward as well. If you like the video, give it a like, give it a sub. Tell me what you guys think would Helldivers and Arrowhead need to do in order to make the game actually gain a positive increase in player count moving forward. What change do you think they should make? Let me know. And if it's a broad change, if it's many, make multiple comments. I will read them and respond to them all. Thank you for your attention, for enjoying. And again, being able to subscribe to the content is the best way to help this content succeed in the future.